Hello and welcome to Golden State Naturalist, a podcast for anyone who's ever wondered, how did those California poppies end up blooming in that vacant lot? I'm Michelle Fulner, and today I'll be talking about just that with Shalaco from SFinBloom. You'll hear all about his unconventional efforts to protect pollinators while bringing more beauty and color back into our cities and neglected areas. And if you looked at the title of this episode and you were like, but what is guerrilla conservation? Are we talking about gigantic furry silverback apes? We are not. Here's a definition for you. According to Oxford Languages, this term guerrilla is referring to actions or activities performed in an impromptu way, often without authorization. And that is exactly what Shalaco does with SFinBloom. He spreads native wildflower seeds in an effort to restore habitat that will protect and conserve our native California pollinators. Before we get to that, make sure to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. You can do that by hitting the little plus sign in the top right corner if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. And while you're there, you can also rate or review the show, which helps more people discover it by keeping it active in the podcast charts. If you want even more Golden State Naturalist, you can become a patron for just $4 a month. With that membership, you get audio and video extras from my interviews in the field, behind-the-scenes information about how the podcast is made and what's coming up next, and more. That helps me pay for things like necessary tech to make a podcast and transportation costs for getting to and from interviews, which are now happening all across the state. Eventually, I'd love to move to releasing episodes weekly instead of every other week, and Patreon is the most direct way to help me make that happen. You can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/Michelle Fulner. That's Michelle with 2 L's, and Fulner is Fullner. You can also find me on social media at Golden State Naturalist on both Instagram and TikTok. My website is www.goldenstatenaturalist.com. But now let's get to the episode because I cannot wait for you to hear from Shalaco. You may already know him from his videos on Instagram and TikTok where he has 246,000 followers. You may have seen him either in person or in his videos riding around San Francisco on a one-wheel in a bee suit, spreading native wildflower seeds with his partner Phoenix. In stark contrast to my typical interviews, climbing over rocks and through forests, we met up in Shalaco's enchanting Victorian house in San Francisco, got settled on a couch instead of a log, and had a great conversation about the importance of native plants, things people say when they see you one-wheeling through a city in a bee suit, what it means to democratize nature and gardening, and what each of us can do to make the planet and our neighborhoods a little bit better. You can see a video of some of our conversation by following SFinBloom on Instagram or TikTok. Without further ado, let's hear from Shalaco about guerrilla conservation, and I don't mean the primates, on Golden State Naturalist.
I guess we're just gonna sit like this. I think that pillow behind you could use a little
This guy?
fluff adjustment. Yeah. Careful, it's a cactus.
Oh, I'm not gonna lie, I actually hesitated for a second when he told me to be careful. But in my defense, normally on my interviews, there could totally be a snake or something.
I like, soft things that look like sharp things.
My couch has cactus pillows on it too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Once we got settled in, I wanted to know a little bit more about the way that Shalaco and Phoenix approach conservation. What is SFinBloom? What do you guys do?
Right. So about a year ago, myself and Phoenix kicked off SFinBloom, and it's the place where we share our knowledge and passion about plants. So Phoenix, she operates Green Earth Gardeners. It's a sustainable landscaping company. I run Shalaco Studios, a creative production studio. We're both passionate about plants, so it's a space where we explore that knowledge and passion. And the response we've gotten from the community has just been overwhelming, especially around just, I'll bring in innovative concepts based on her formal education and knowledge around plants. And so just spreading native wildflower seeds with a Parmesan cheese shaker, like so. We're not the first to go out and do native urban conservation, but we have inspired thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people to go, invest in their community ecology and support their local ecosystems.
For sure, because you're not maybe the first to do it, but maybe the first ones to do it in bee suits.
I mean, that was just, that's a bold statement. I don't know, but you're welcome to. We were invited by someone in the community to throw on a bee suit. They're like, you should do this in a bee suit. So we did, why not? And that, as silly as it is, it creates this approachability and excitement around it where people want to know why I'm dressed as a bee. People want to know what's going on, and people it sends them over the top to see, oh, there's this person, they're one-wheeling, oh, and they're contributing to the environment, oh, and they're dressed as a bee, is like kind of sends them over the top.
Right, for sure.
Where, it brings this passion and excitement. And I think that's needed to help make a change, to help steer things more in the right direction.
Right, and I think what I really like about that is that it's so accessible. I think that having a silly costume is just welcoming, and everybody feels instantly comfortable with that. And they're like, what? I can ask a question, right? Like I can ask a question to somebody in a bee suit. And also I don't have to get my PhD in this before I can start to do something about it. So I like the accessibility factor.
Definitely. That's been something that's been important to us. This is the little hipster. And so, it's just a little, 1 ounce shaker filled with, California poppies or the variety maritima.
So Shalaco actually gave me one of these little hipster shakers, and I was so excited about it. I took it to work with me. I'm a public school teacher, and I gave it to the kids in my garden club and just told them to go crazy, in areas that are hard to reach by the mower. And so there's just weeds growing there, and they just shook seeds all over the place. We had so much fun. There's going to be a video of that on my social media in the next couple of days, if it's not there already by the time you hear this.
And you can give this to a kid, and even if they're pre-speech level, you can say, this makes that, and show them the flower, show them this makes that. And it just shows how universal, I think, that excitement about the magic of life, that this little pellet of seed, this little seed pellet can then grow into a flower and make more. There's something innately and universally amazing about that that people can connect over.
And so I was going to ask too, because I was looking at your mission statement about how what's important too is that idea that goes with accessibility of democratizing nature and democratizing gardening. Can you just explain a little more about what you mean when you say that?
Yeah, I suppose what it means is that, everyone can have a vote in nature, and everyone can have accessibility to it. And there's sometimes people are like, oh, well, did you get consent to do this? It's like, I think it's interesting that people would want consent to do conservation work in public or neglected spaces. Meanwhile, there's ecological disasters. Nobody asks consent for those. I think if we sit waiting around to get permission or following the traditional ways, that's gonna gob things up, because we've seen the UN report on climate change. We know that the best case scenario is the worst thing we've ever seen. So really it's how do we make taking action and thinking globally, acting locally, and make it accessible. And so, what we do is we tell our story and what we do, and we condense it into social media clips that then people can share our passion and sort of see the process, but have that instant gratification, and then have that seed planted, and then are educating each other on the importance of native, non-invasive, beneficial plants.
The really cool thing about this is that Shalaco said that he'll see comments from many different languages across the world where people are having this conversation about the importance of planting native. And remember that planting native depends on where you live. So the species of flowers that you might find is going to depend on what naturally occurs in an area or what is indigenous to that area. And planting what occurs naturally in an area supports all of the local pollinators and other invertebrates, which in turn supports an entire food web.
In California, we have 1,600 native bee species alone. Wow. The western monarch butterfly declined 99.9% according to the Xerces Society in 2021. 1 in 4 native bee species in North America is reportedly in decline. And so we see that we're in an extinction event. We see that species are struggling. It's sometimes, I hear that it's overwhelming. like, what can I do? And so it's just, we do our best to make it fun, accessible for people who think they may not have enough time or money or knowledge or whatever to help be aware, share the passion, and, find a way that they can at least steer the ship a little bit more in the right direction.
Sure, absolutely. And so for people who are, learning about this for the first time, what do you think is kind of the most accessible thing that they can do? What is the easiest way, entry level, to get involved?
Yeah. So how we approach that is to, we made shakers for California that are just generally native, non-invasive shakers because, we started by just grabbing, wildflowers off the shelf and then going and like spreading around our neighborhoods. But as we looked into it, these were beneficial. They weren't invasive in our area, but there was a higher standard that we could go to. So to make it accessible, we've started packaging up ones for California that have different from like the Sierras, like a higher elevation mix. And then we have a Central California and then a Bay Area blend to have more like hyper local mixes.
Nice.
And so we're working on having just at least nationally being able to cover, oftentimes it's broken down into 5 regions.
Okay.
But it's as simple as we try and make it accessible by offering a product that helps people get to that, solution and can trust that we're helping them find the, beneficial flowers for their area. But if you want to do it yourself, we compiled resources and basically starts with just understanding like what is a native plant, what's an indigenous versus an endemic plant, what are invasive plants, why is that important to know?
Okay, here are some definitions for you from the Natural Resources Conservation Service in Connecticut. They say a native plant is a plant that is part of the balance of nature that has developed over hundreds or thousands of years in a particular region or ecosystem. So you might say a plant is native to California because it has been found there for thousands of years. Then an endemic plant is a plant that is only found in a specific area. For example, you might say a plant is endemic to California, like the blue oak, because the blue oak isn't found anywhere except California. So it's a California endemic. And then an invasive plant is a plant that is both non-native and able to establish on many sites, grow quickly, and spread to the point of disrupting plant communities or ecosystems. So basically, it's a non-native plant that is harmful to the native ecosystem. There is so much great information left in this interview, including some great tips on guerrilla conservation from Shalaco, as well as some good stories of his. So stay tuned. There's just going to be a short break. And now back to the interview.
Right. And like, what would you say is the benefit? Because you were saying before, it's like, you can get these general pollinator seed packs. You see them all over.
Sure.
You can get it at Home Depot. You know what I mean? What's the benefit of getting the more locally native ones over those?
Right. So, what we recommend, like if you want to just do it yourself, you go get whatever dispenser method you want. We like shakers, find something that speaks to you. And then we mix them with organic sterilized rice hulls that just spaces the seeds apart so you don't overplant it. And then we recommend like a native pollinator mix. And so that's nice because you get a variety of flowers and you see what's successful. And of course, if you're planting in your own yard, you can plant like whatever you want. But like, what's the importance? Like one thing I read recently was, someone who was waking up to this and learning more, they were like, I really love this flower.
Right.
When I learned about it, it turns out it's invasive. But I'm like, well, what harm can it be doing in my yard? Well, then you might have, they were explaining that they found out that birds would then come and then be dispersing the seed. So while it's well behaved in your yard, it may be going on and doing who knows what out there. And so, like a lot of the times you're like, oh, well, what's the harm in that? And so it's just, ecology is complex. And so the amazing thing is you're always going to have opportunity to learn more about it. But basically, like in a lot of the times European flowers are mixed in with wildflower mixes and they're not all made the same. And so something like a bachelor button that looks, you're like, oh, it's a beautiful, unique flower. Comes in nice blue, sometimes pink. But it's invasive in, I think, like 3 or 4 different states. And so that's not something you want to go throwing around all willy-nilly. And so, what's the impact of that? It's a plant that can take over a habitat, crowd out resources, crowd out other plants, and there's some guerrilla gardeners who may not even realize that they're guerrilla gardeners. Like, for example, people who go and feed birds, and they go and they scatter bird seed, and they often aim for like the tree planters. Well, those are all, unless you got non-germinating bird seed, you're now guerrilla gardening, and it's with the cheapest seeds that you can get.
Right.
I could imagine someone who's going to a place where there's like birds and wanting to like feed the birds, maybe they're even going to a habitat or like a conservation space, spreading bird seed and unknowingly be distributing invasive grasses that are going to have a real impact on the ecology and what's growing there.
Sure.
So it's like people are going to be out there and doing that and planting. And so, the way we see it is, well, if we can help reach some of those people and help them better understand and create a space for the community to educate each other, there's going to be, tons of people who just are like, wait, I can plant things?
Right.
So, finding a way to get ahead and get out there and meet them. And then, you have tons of people pop up in the comments and they're like, yeah, I just went to the Dollar Tree and got like seeds. And you're like, great. Wildflowers don't equal native wildflowers.
Right.
Here's where you can find resources to like educate. And that's sort of the trailhead for learning more. And lots of people are going to make mistakes, but I think that's where you start at. And then from there you learn. That's how we learn. And everyone, there was a point where you didn't know what the word for tree was. So like everyone has to enter and learn somewhere. And so we do our best to meet people where they are at and, provide resources to help them along their journey.
What I think I love the most about this is that it's so clear that there is just space for everyone in this kind of activity. It doesn't matter how much you know or what your background is or where you're from. If you can get a few native wildflower seeds, this is something you can do.
Right, for sure. And it's cool that you do provide tools. Like if somebody doesn't know where to start, it's like, well, buy a shaker, and like, here's something, or here's somewhere that you can, or here's the kind of seeds that you can use, so that's fantastic.
I think it's just as important to like encourage people. And I think that encouragement just works a lot better than criticism.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to shut people down, right? Like if you shut people down, then they're not going to participate. And then there's, some bees without lunch, right?
Just stoke the fire, like, right? How can we like stoke the fire? But like, we also just do our best to have our ear open to the community.
Right.
We just take the time to sit and listen to the community and hear what's important, and then start, looking into it. When we started, we had like a can of Renee's mix, and like Alexis Nicole, Black Forager, showed up and was like, yay, flowers, but like Renee's mix inexplicably contains like European flowers. And we're like,
oh my gosh,
wait, does it? Wait, so, okay, where can I get native flowers? Okay, and then we start sourcing native flowers. It's like, but none of them have rice hulls, so we get those. And then it's like, well, now we'll put that in a shaker. And then people are like, I want it too. And you're like, I guess we have a shaker company now.
A shaker business.
Because I bought it all in bulk. And
oh my God,
now
that's
I have,
amazing.
And then people like anteed up and they bought like 3 pounds of seeds. I'm like, I've never bought 3 pounds of seeds. I need 5 pounds of seeds.
Ton.
Yeah. And so then, people are like, I spent like $300 on seeds. I'm like, I don't even know. It's out of pocket, and I've spent a lot.
Yeah. See, as somebody who likes to garden, I have a ridiculous amount of seeds for like vegetable seeds,
Yeah.
There's not
that's
space
when
for all of those
you
seeds.
start running out of place at your own space to have plants, and then you're like, well, that place burned down, 7 years ago, and they haven't put anything there since, and they went and they got rid of all the flowers that showed up from the seed bank.
When Shalaco mentions a seed bank, he's talking about something that's also sometimes called the soil seed bank, which is, according to Wikipedia, the natural storage of seeds often dormant within the soil of most ecosystems. So it's just kind of the seeds that are naturally laying around. They'll stay dormant there often for a super long time, and then, under the right conditions, they'll germinate.
So let's go add some flowers there.
Right. Well, it's like star thistle there now. So like, let's just throw
I
some
think
good
that's
stuff,
like part of it is a lot of, there's people who don't have access to the dirt, to the yard, to the space.
Sure.
And part of it is that it becomes accessible to them. They don't need to have a yard necessarily to contribute. And there's places where it's just obvious that, you don't want to do this on places that have land management, on places where there's like farming or agriculture, because you don't know how that's going to interfere.
Sure.
But there's plenty of places that are like clearly neglected where you're only going to make a positive impact.
Right. And I think what's cool too is that you have a lot of people who, like you say, don't have access to a patch of dirt, right? And so for a lot of them, it may never enter their minds to garden, right? And so it's kind of cool because it opens up a world, and it puts a fresh idea in someone's head of like, again, that idea of welcoming people, like to a space where maybe they've never been truly welcomed to before.
Yeah, we see ourselves very much at the entrance when people are just getting a taste for that excitement. I think that's a powerful place to be. And so, meeting people at the very beginning of the entrance into this, and I was watching the Bill Nye movie last night, and he said that they found it was up until the age of 10 that you had to get people passionate about science for them to be into science. And so thinking about it from that approach of can we get, maybe it's not as dire as a cutoff of 10 years old, because there's people of all age ranges getting excited about what we do. But I think the earlier you can plant that seed, the better, and the more time they have to accumulate knowledge and experience. And initial gardening is a lot of failure. It's failing a lot. And so to create content that engages people, you want to show them the cream of the crop of success. That's what's going to stand out.
Yeah.
But then also not want them to get discouraged when they inevitably fail.
Right. And you mentioned, I was like, what about germination rates? And you were like,
I'm the worst.
It was
I
it's
probably
bad.
am the least successful. I probably have the least successful germination rate, but I also probably have the highest. I don't know where to get stats on this, but I have to imagine I'm up there with people who've planted the most native plants in San Francisco,
right?
Or the amount of biodiversity that I've seen that I've just brought to my street alone. It's it's a numbers game. So I just put myself out there a lot, and you learn what succeeds and what fails, and you get the nice thing is you get surprised by it.
There is such a bigger lesson to take away from this. When I know something isn't likely to give me fantastic results, I'll sometimes feel defeated and just keep doom scrolling. But what I take from what Shalaco is saying is that if we get out there and do something and keep trying at whatever that thing may be, we can start to notice patterns of what works and experience this little burst of joy when something succeeds where it really shouldn't have. And I also think that just the act of trying in the face of bad odds is in itself meaningful. The fact that you try is an act of resistance against the desire to give up. And it almost doesn't matter sometimes if a thing works out the way we wanted it to or not, because just getting out there reinforces the idea that living life is worth the effort and sometimes leads to unexpected opportunities or relationships or even just getting sunshine on our skin. Okay, back to seeds.
There's all these areas, and I think it's cool because there's areas close to my house and it's just a field, right? And I'm always kind of discouraged. I've thought before about spreading some seeds there, but I'm they mow it. You know what I mean? Or but it's if you don't spread seeds there, then they'll never have a chance to grow.
So you want to start with first it's determining okay, you want to look into it a little bit. I have people being oh, there's this amazing meadow near my place. I'm is it a prairie habitat? Is it a managed or protected or, piece of land that already has its own biodiversity? So that's the first thing you want to check in with. Or we hear from farmers who are oh, we have the hardest time with lupin, or we have the hardest time with this, or stuff gets mixed in with our grass and then our livestock can't eat it. So there's a lot of things to be aware of. And of course on the internet, it's you have to simplify everything to reach people. But when you do find those challenging places, but you get a foot in, it's so satisfying, even just for one. And this is where what I refer to as like rage planting comes in, or like vengeance planting, where you've like planted 3 years ago. DG was like all the thing and all the gardeners use it. But what happens is it compresses into a solid layer, and then moisture can't get in and plants can't get up. And so like all these, it looks like cat litter a lot of the time, that like cream DG, like nothing grows in there. But then I saw one nasturtium we had like grow, and then somebody put a berm around it, and I was like, oh my God, we got something in there. And then, you know, I think the nasturtium probably passed, and then I just like threw in a handful of poppies there, and then the poppies started to grow. And that's, you know, when you start to get that one, or like they'll come through, they hit it with the weed whacker, but then it grows back. And you're like, yeah. But it's very Buddhist practice of like, you can't, street life is hard, you can't get attached to the plants. You can't help but getting attached to the plants. And you just have to, what I do is I just focus on planting so much that by the time they sprout, it's a surprise. And then you're just like, oh, it's just like a pleasant surprise. But then even you have like well-intentioned people who will go and they don't know what native plants look like, and they'll weed out the bed, and they'll like weed out the native plants, and you're like, you left the invasive grasses and weeded out the beneficials. Here's an education opportunity. So we just look at like education. It's all opportunity. I don't even remember who I was talking to who said that, but they said that they would put in like a plant, like California fuchsia or something like that, and plant it in like a landscaped area. And then they would put a little flag that was like native plant I think you're talking about Sacramento Food Forest.
Oh, maybe it was,
Side note, Sacramento Food Forest is absolutely fantastic. I always learn so much about California native plants and native bees from his posts, and he's also hilarious. So give him a follow if you haven't already.
He's like, he gets so into it. He goes out in the middle of the night. It's like definitely some like Crime Pays Botany Doesn't vibes there.
Oh my God.
Where he brings that energy. And like that was the first Crime Pays Botany Doesn't video I saw, was he was going in Oakland. He was out there planting like trees that he had grown from seed, or like saplings, and then going out and planting them and mulching them and showing visit. And he was the Department of Unauthorized Forestry.
Oh, nice.
Right. He brings so much more plant and geography and biology and geology knowledge, and so many more swear words than I do. But then Sacramento Food Forest is also like, you know, similar, and he goes out there and he's like planting stuff in the middle of the night. He's like, you just put a little orange flag in there and the landscapers will just leave it alone, you know. Just
That's
like
so great.
little pro tips.
That's great.
You know, and they're really like passionate and driven, and I think a lot of the creators you see at the forefront of this they're hyper fixating in positive ways on channeling their excitement about things into like making change and difference.
Right. Well, and if that even just educates some people to like think about when they landscape their yard, right? Like what they put in.
It's been amazing. So we've had our friend over at Gardenista is like, we're planting more native plants because we're inspired by you. We've had people drop in the comments like, somebody was like, do you visit golf courses? I'm like, you know, this guy showed up in the comments. He's like, I manage the golf courses landscaping, and we're bringing in more native and beneficial plants because we're inspired by you. And so that, you know, has really been where things have been successful for us is planting that seed, and not just about planting plants for your own sake, but being aware of their larger role in an ecosystem, in the ecology.
So why are native plants so important? Honestly, this is such a big question that it deserves its own episode. But the short answer is that native plants do the best job supporting the most diverse array of wildlife in any given area. They're also amazing to grow because they require less water and aren't dependent on fertilizer and pesticides to thrive like non-native species are. This is because they're adapted to the natural moisture levels, soil types, and pests that exist within their range.
And getting people to be considerate of that and educate themselves and get excited about, we're seeing this transition from colonial landscaping, thirsty turfgrass lawns, to people being excited about beneficial habitat gardens. And so that's where we started, we're like, okay, we'll, you know, teach a class on like converting your lawn to a beneficial habitat garden. People are like, cool. And we're like, we can show people how to install drip irrigation to have like the most water efficient way of watering their yard. People will be excited about that, right? And they're like, cool. And we're like, I'm gonna dress as a bee and spread native wildflowers on a one wheel. What? This is awesome. Okay.
That's what the people want.
Crowd favorite. All right.
That's amazing. It's hit and miss. It's hit and miss, right? Well, but then you do the bee suit thing, and then more people go to your website and are like, oh, hey, I want to convert my lawn, right? Like, it gets the message out.
I think it's a trailhead, and then we are there to like meet people wherever they are in their plant journey.
Right.
So like the whole way that we approached it was like, hey, if you think you're too broke, too busy, you don't have enough light, you don't have enough space, we're gonna share with you ways that you can bring nature and plants into your life. And so, we live in a dark, cold, Victorian. Over here, you described this as, how did you describe it?
Sheltered? Like it's
Conservatory of flowers.
Oh yeah, this room was like a conservatory of flowers for sure.
Yeah, so, and that's done with grow lights in classical fixtures that look aesthetically pleasing, that are on smart plugs. So that, that was kind of the approach, is like, hey, let's make it simple and easy for people to bring nature in and find innovative ways to do it for ourselves, and use that to find the modality and then share that modality with people. This is the modality that struck with people the most, is around volunteer urban conservation.
Yeah, for sure. And do you have any good stories? Like when you're out there in the bee suit, do you ever just have like people say crazy things or do?
Yeah, everyone driving past is going to yell like bee puns at us.
Oh my God.
I looked up some bee puns, and let me just tell you, there is really no end to the ways that you can take the to be verb and then just kind of tack on an extra E and call it good. Also, there are a lot of other words that sound like pollen. So, bee puns. Not all they're cracked up to be.
And like we've had people that are like, I saw you over there, and then I pulled over and stopped, and then they're like, want to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that is the beginning of the conversation,
right,
of now someone who is like walking down the street thinking about whatever is now stopped, and they're engaging you in a conversation. They want to learn about what you're doing and why. And it just ignites like an excitement. And we've done like so many interviews, and those are always like an amazing experience, because when you sit down with the journalist, you get to see one-on-one how you've ignited this like passion in them. Like when we talked to Euronews Green, the journalist from there was like, her story is about how she's like doom scrolling in the middle of the night, and then comes across a TikTok and is like, oh my God, and then like binge dives in, and then the next day goes out, buys seeds, like, researches it, finds the right ones, and then is like thinking about where they're going to plant them. And that's just, I think, if you're going to move a big ship, you need to do a lot of little turns.
Yeah.
Right? It moves gradually.
So much of it is just that raising that general public awareness level, right?
And it's in the last year plus, I would say, I've seen it explode exponentially. Like I never thought a plant post would, make the front page of Reddit.
Right, that's
and
great.
Then you look, and there's plant communities, and I'm in most of the plant communities, but the space that was had in that conversation and how people showed up, and they're like, they start by criticizing because the person who reposted the video didn't mention that I'm planting like native and beneficial plants, and they did attribute, but it was like, that doesn't get the upvotes. It's the irreverent or snarky comment that gets the upvotes.
Right.
So people lead with like the concern and criticism, which is really, we just see as caring, right? They're caring and communicating. And then other people they sniffed us out, and then they're like, no, they're planting native beneficial. And then the original person who's like the top comment then edits their comment to be like, I'm not criticizing this person, and they're also like doing it right.
Hey.
I'm just saying like, and then you go through and you read like all the conversations, and you're like, this is it. This post created a space to have the ecological and conservation plant conversation about how we can all be conservationists, how we can all be invited to play a positive role. And it's such a major thing that you really have to have you really have to have local knowledge to like get into it, even if you're following a general set of principles.
Right. And I think it's interesting too, you had mentioned the concept of responsibility before, right? Like it's not only that people are welcome to do it, but like, what do you see as just the responsibility of humans? You know what I mean? Like at this point.
Well, what I would say is traditionally humans are like very human first, human centric. That's just humans are going to be humans. And you're not going to get them to like, probably not going to get them to stop burning fossil fuels. You're not going to get us to like make major changes that like impact lifestyle. But there is, it does feel like there's a change in the tide. And what that, to me, the general tide change I see is that initially lawns were like a sign of status and like wealth. There is like a practicality about it, but it was all about bringing in exotic things because they look different from where you are. It serves you, and it's like even cities are just largely like people first. A lot of people consider themselves like separate from like animals and nature, and you see a switch in that tide where now people are looking at how do we bring more nature into cities, and that the benefits of that, and then that people are wanting to change and convert their lawns not from this colonial aesthetic of a thirst trap turf grass yard, but bring in native and beneficial plants, have a more drought tolerant, have something that's like the purpose is that it uses less water, or the purpose is that it's a habitat, or you can certify your lawn as a wildlife habitat. But overall there's a tide shifting, and it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. You can keep your turf grass center of your lawn and have like different sides or aspects of it that then help serve the other purpose if you need that function.
I've heard this concept described as instead of thinking of your lawn as wall-to-wall carpet, think of it as like a throw rug, and you can just put it where you actually need it, surrounding it with native plants.
But that's the shift that we've been seeing. It's kind of like each spark that ignites then connects with more people see it. So Phoenix converted a lawn to a native habitat garden, and so you plant some medium to mature plants, like 1 gal to 5 gals, so that you have something that is consistent, right? Because the wildflowers are going to be seasonal. And then you can plant the wildflowers by seed. It's more economical. And then you have your drip irrigation that you've hopefully laid before all of this, or you can just do xeriscaping, rely on the winter rains. And then when the delivery driver would come and drop off the food delivery, they're supposed to send a photo of the delivery. They would send a photo of the yard. And they said that they could literally hear all the yard just abuzz with bees, which scares some people because they think of European honeybees. Now, from my understanding, I'm not an entomologist, but that native California bees don't have, the 1,600 of them don't have stingers.
Really?
That's a broad statement.
Gosh,
so I'd want to look into that, but you don't have to be scared of the stingers.
So I did a little bit of digging on this, and female native bees do typically have stingers, but because so many of them are solitary, they're not defending a hive, and so they're very unlikely to actually use their stinger. Also, the smaller species, their sting isn't big enough to actually penetrate human skin. And also, no male bees have stingers, native or otherwise.
And then the people with strong allergies are like, oh, my poor allergies. It's like, you're thinking, these are not the allergens you're looking for. Those are cedar, oak, like big pollen, chestnuts. Those are what's going to like inflame your, it's not a little wildflower pollen. Maybe try some local honey. I hear that helps a lot. But people, they go and they convert their lawn, and then you see how much that one stands out. But what if you got 2 people on your block to convert it, or 5 people, or get a stretch of people, or create a pollinator pathway, a pollinator boulevard. Convert like Dolores Street into like a pollinator boulevard. And there are people who are actively working on those things.
That is very cool.
One of the powerful things about when more than one person starts to convert their lawn into native plants is that then that can actually become a corridor for wildlife to be able to move around, and it increases the area where they can live. So if you are ever able to convert your lawn, it's always great if you can talk a neighbor into it too.
Yeah, and so I was going to say, I think that segues to like one of the things I was rattling around in my head, because as somebody who lives in a city and who also has an eye for design and art and beauty, like what do you see as like, what do you wish cities could be in terms of that interface, right, between wild things in nature and being human friendly?
Yeah, so this ties into our mission because what we're working on is finding other people who are doing amazing things and connecting with them and helping highlight what they're doing. So sharing the love and attention that we've been getting, because there's lots of people doing amazing things. So like in San Francisco, we have Friends of the Urban Forest and they plant trees, and that's great. Their approach I see is kind of it's monoculture. They plant like it's one tree per one tree well. Permaculture, 7 layers of the forest, you have various layers of plants.
Right.
So the steps I've seen like in the right direction is there's tree planting, there's improvement in hardscaping, there's rain gardens, so people are sinking water from the rain into our aquifers instead of mixing it with sewage.
Right. That makes sense. Hey.
Right? Their plant choices just over the last few years, and granted, I'm just primarily in San Francisco, so I'm not sure how much is part of like an overall trend, but I do see them making better plant choices. What I would like to see is an incorporation of more native and beneficial plants into cities. Also, like the thinking of, it's just think about wildlife and nature and what those things needs are and work on incorporating them. And sometimes it's trial and error, and figure out how you can incorporate it more. Like, can you, we have large, like I never thought that the monarch butterfly would be at risk of extinction, right? So like, what can you do? Well, it's like the 4 major variables impacting them are climate change, okay? So that's causing irregularity in the weather. I'm not sure how we can tackle that besides like addressing the overall climate crisis. Then you have habitat loss.
Habitat loss is the main reason why so many people are planting milkweed in their yards now. Milkweed is the only place where a monarch butterfly will lay its eggs. So simple things like that are ways of helping support insect populations.
Then you have pesticide use. Those are like the major impactors on beneficial insects. So stop using nicotinoids, reduce the use of pesticides. And we have a video with Dwayne Sparkman, who he worked at the Westin in Maui, and all his landscaping they did at this 4-star hotel with that amazing emerald grass, all of it was done free of pesticides. Nice. And that's because of a liability approach, that they wanted to reduce the liability, and if you didn't have the pesticides, then you eliminated the risk of exposure to guests and employees.
Yeah.
But then he created the modality that demonstrated not only could it be used, but you reduced your overhead and you got better results. So short answer is like find innovative modalities that help us increase the habitat, that help us decrease the pesticide, and then create some reliability for these, leave some space for the other things, and that benefits us. It's only going to benefit us in having, because we have strength and biodiversity. Those are like the primary things. If like cities could incorporate like a 10% native and beneficial planting.
I tried to look this up to see if there are any cities in California already requiring these kinds of ratios of native plants to non-native plants in plantings. I couldn't find anything, and so either it's not happening or it's not super obvious on the internet. There are a lot of laws on the books about not disturbing native plants or not removing them, particularly in delicate areas or protected areas, but I didn't see anything about new plantings. Like Shalaco's saying, that would be a really great direction for cities to move.
If they can look at testing out, doing one test program where they don't rely on pesticides and they find alternative ways, and then you'll focus on soil health, focus on those kinds of things. And I think there's just a certain amount of innovation that comes with that. And so we see a bit we see a bit of that, and sometimes it just takes a passionate person who goes out and does it. Like I was hearing an interesting story, I think it may have been Tucson, Arizona. It was like illegal to do what he was doing, but they had an issue where how they had built the town, like all the roof rain runoff and the street rain runoff flooded all the streets. And then, so he went in and he like, without permits, went in and like took up the concrete to create pathways for the water to then go get sunk in with plants. And then he created these big plant pathways that then created cooling areas and sunk the water. And now the city is incorporating the ideas he did.
That's amazing, yeah.
And in the beginning, all of what he was doing was not
not
legal or by the books or anything. But sometimes you just need that innovator to step out and like try it out.
Like you show what's possible.
And ask permission, ask forgiveness instead of permission. And then, people learn from that.
People have learned from it so much, in fact, that Tucson is actually offering subsidies for rainwater harvesting. So I found an article on resilience.org that says in 2012, the city's water utility, Tucson Water, began offering rebates to its residential customers to subsidize installation of rainwater catchment systems, both to divert water onto landscaping and store it in cisterns. Later, it expanded the program to include grants and loans to help low-income households harvest rainwater. Later in the article, it talks about how the water has to fall soon before you actually need to use it. So I'm not sure if it would work in California because we get most of our rainfall in the winter and then we have long, dry summers, whereas in Tucson, they actually get a lot of their rain in the summer close to when they will need it. However, we have such smart, creative people, I'm sure we could figure out a way around that problem. Right? Who's with me? And then the other important piece of the puzzle is communication with the powers that be.
And then it's really just show how it's in their best interest and learn how to speak their language, where they're coming from, what their values are. Is it a spreadsheet, a bottom line of a spreadsheet? Is it a liability? Is it so in San Francisco, biodiversity is listed as one of the initiatives passed by a supervisor. Okay, supervisors, what does that mean?
Right.
We don't know. Maybe they have an idea about what that means, but go find that out, find out what programs are out there, what initiatives are out there, and then propose something.
Right, yeah, and that actually, I was gonna ask you too about systemic support.
Yeah.
Like, do you see any initiatives that you wish, or like something that you wish would get support from local government or state or whatever level?
Yeah, so that's a work in progress for us, and it's kind of like our pie in the sky area. Like, where we see our role is to find people who have that passion about plants and find plant stewards and then find opportunities and then connect them. So they may already exist. So for example, Caltrans manages like on-ramps, right? And so like we went and we like planted up an on-ramp, but then they come and they cover it in like wood chips, and so you're like, okay, we're just fighting against each other. So, and then we go and we talk to someone in the city, and they're like, okay, well, here's who manages it. First thing is to identify who manages the project or the land, and then talk around, find out what so there are actual programs where people can steward those spaces and get access and consent or permission, whatever, to like access and maintain the space. And so really what we're focused on is like finding those things and then connecting people with them. And so, our big ones are, okay, let's find out who's like managing land and see like, can we help turn them on to some new modalities and practices that might like benefit them and also like support our mission and do good locally. Right. And then is there one that we're really interested in is like tree aftercare, tree maintenance. Everyone's excited about planting trees, but then meanwhile you might have tree deaths outpacing tree plantings, but the funding comes attached to like, oh, well, we fund you per planting, and then they don't have the resources for aftercare.
Right.
So like what we're really interested in is like knowing what programs are out there, because we don't know them all, highlighting amazing programs to help other people become more aware of them, finding out where their pain points are, and then seeing if we can collaborate on creating an opportunity where, say, like Friends of the Urban Forest can, that we can bring in a group of people who, we show like tree maintenance and aftercare, and the people who might show up and be upset and protest when you have to cut a tree down. Well, what if we got all those people to show up and learn tree maintenance and aftercare to help go around in under 5 minutes? You can do the preventative maintenance sometimes that will prevent a tree from needing to get cut down, from having the leader grow into a building or too far into the street, mistakings, stakes that have been hit by cars. So like, can we connect those things and get the people who are passionate about it to help, where funding and all of that can only go so far, and so find out where that stops or where the pain points are, and see if you can connect it with the community that's really passionate about it, and then rinse and repeat, and sort of listen to the people. What do people want to be involved in, and see what's already there, and then find where there's like opportunities, and then connect them. That's been our approach.
I love this a lot because I think that there are a lot of people out there who have energy and time to be able to help with things, but they don't always know the best direction to turn, or how to get the training that they need to do the work that needs to be done, or even entirely what kind of work needs to be done. So it's really helpful to connect people with the training and connect them with the volunteer opportunities that they might be looking for. Okay, next I'm going to say something that only kind of makes sense, but Shalaco was nice and he totally ran with it anyway.
Yeah, and then you get this expanded knowledge. It kind of reminds me, I don't know, this connection is super random, but in Fahrenheit 451, at the end where it's like each person is a book, right? Because they've burned all of the copies of the book, and the knowledge is like held in a person, right? And then it becomes like that person's responsibility to spread that book.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're really excited about, is intergenerational knowledge and collaboration. And a lot of the times, the people who are doing really innovative stuff, or just have a lot of plant knowledge and are invested in and doing projects, tend to be older and less knowledgeable about social media. So if we can find people who like have knowledge and are doing amazing things and help them tell their story, we can help elevate what they're doing by helping it reach a new audience and spreading the knowledge and awareness and whatever their message is, or whatever they learned. And then also connecting people with, okay, you want to like garden. I don't need to like create a gardening project. People are like, oh, you should go plant fruits and vegetables. It's like, that sounds like a community gardening project. The point being that you can like connect people, and I think there's a commonality, there's a shared passion about plants and nature that everyone can connect with. And in a world where we have so much divisive and derisiveness, I think it's really important to connect people to find our commonality and find our common ground, and see what blooms from there. So if we can go and connect with like Judith from Larner Seeds.
I'm going to put a link to Larner Seeds in the show notes because they have amazing varieties of California native seeds, from grasses and wildflowers to shrubs and vines, and actually even bulbs. It is the coolest. And Shalaco already did an SFinBloom video back in July. So definitely check that out if you want to see what the Larner Seeds shop looks like.
And then like help a whole new generation of people get like excited about what they're doing. Then, it's helping make that accessible, and then people democratically can vote with their dollar or their time to go be like involved in those things. Go check them out.
And different things will appeal to different people, but if you get the message big enough, then people can self-sort in that way, right? Like they can pick what they want to get involved with.
So we've been building, an email list. I think it's up to like 260 people are signed up.
Nice.
And then we're reaching out to organizations and being like, hey, we know we want to help with tree aftercare. Can we like organize a community workshop where you show people how to do the aftercare? Because if FUF trains you, then you're like certified to go and do like the trimming or the, and we see people who take it into their own hands, who you can make expensive mistakes very fast. if you can see the cuts on the tree, then it could
Probably
be better.
wasn't done appropriately.
A good arborist, you can't tell where they cut the
yeah.
tree.
When Shalaco was saying this, I was actually like trying to be cool, but I was kind of squirming inside because I was thinking about this tree in my backyard that I completely butchered. I did such a bad job trying to prune this tree. I do not know what I'm doing. Anyways, I need to take a tree pruning class. I'm sorry, little tree.
That's cool.
But then like just connect those people. You know, we hear about it from the other groups. There's like, you know, people get very passionate about trees being cut down. It's like, well, let's find the place where you can make a difference and help
Prevent the tree from getting cut down.
and then like find, you know, just sort of make our rounds and then find different groups who need a community lift, and then sort of like go in, do a community lift, and then through that create a piece of content that helps share that story that then elevates the message and inspires more people to either get involved hands-on or to, you know, do something similar.
Right, sure. Or throw dollars at the right thing. Like, support this group.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I just have one last question for you. And it is just like, you know, you've been doing this for about a year now?
So we kicked off SFinBloom last year, but me and Phoenix have been planting since our like first date.
Oh, nice.
Like on our
It's a good first date.
There was my neighbor's citrus tree had been stolen during a rainstorm. Yeah, people steal citrus trees. Yeah. And so I thought that was pretty lame. And I had already been kind of Robin Hooding succulents, finding succulents that were like left discarded or like overgrown, where it's like overgrown and it's like harming the plant, and then you go plant it into a place where they had a plant that like died, and it's a similar, you're like, okay, you're into succulents here, like here, let's fill in this little thing. And then so we were on a date, and it was right after that tree was stolen, and then there was a tree aloe had been like hit by a car and was just being bleached out in the sun in like a parking lot. So I took it and we planted it in her yard.
Oh, nice.
And at first, she's actually like a designer too. She does garden and landscape designs too. And she was like, yeah, somebody planted a tree aloe there. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And she's like, yeah, you know, she's just bummed about like, it wasn't her citrus tree. Like she's bummed about the plant she planted getting stolen. And then now it's like the size of a smart car. And then later she's like, it's grown on me. Like it really filled in the space.
I just feel like only in San Francisco can you get away with measuring things in smart car units.
And what about it? Like now you've been doing it for a while. Like what about doing this either still like surprises you or blows your mind or still just takes your breath away?
I mean, right now it's that think globally, act locally thing. So there's like the part that's just here basically feeling like a fae, like Artemis.
So Artemis in Greek mythology was not only the goddess of the hunt, but also of vegetation. And according to Britannica, she was the goddess of wild nature who danced, usually accompanied by nymphs in mountains, forests, and marshes.
Now you walk around, you're like, wow, all of these, there's always something in bloom all year round. And that's an impact I had. And that is contagious. On the social media side, it's just like blows up. Like that's what my notifications look like on any, that's like
any given moment.
Yeah, so that's like
that's
4,000 new followers and like 638 comments, and they're all talking about
wild.
They're all talking about being inspired about plants and nature, wanting to get involved in doing it too, and so that's like really global fire.
I just think it's really cool that in thinking globally and acting locally, Shalaco is also inspiring people globally to think locally, if that makes any kind of sense. Okay, I'm gonna let him sign us off. He was taking a video for his social media, so Shalaco is saying goodbye here.
So if you want to check out our full conversation, check out Michelle's podcast, The Golden State Naturalist, and we will see you in the next one.
Bye.
I had such a good time talking to Shalaco. After we got done talking, we went out and we actually checked out the street where he and Phoenix have been working so hard to plant all of these native seeds, and they are just going crazy. It's beautiful. So make sure to go follow SFinBloom on TikTok and Instagram if you don't already. Couple of other notes. Shalaco mentioned to make sure to plant in the fall if possible. So you can throw seeds any time of year, and it contributes to a seed bank, which, stays there in the soil. But if you plant in the fall, then the winter rains will come and the plants will have a much better chance of success. It's also a great idea to look for areas that are not getting regularly mowed and areas where there's some kind of irrigation or some kind of water supply. Also, if you're listening to this and you're not from California, you might be like, hey, what about me? Well, there's lots of places where you can find seeds in your area. So if you're from a different state, make sure to search the name of your state and then look for native plants or local seeds to your area and search for it that way. Or if you're from another country, also make sure that you're looking within your specific region of your country, because if your country is kind of big, then there might be a lot of different regions and you might need to really make sure that you're getting seeds local to your area. Thankfully, there's a lot of online stores for seeds now, so definitely just do some Googling about that. Also, if you enjoyed what you heard, please, please, please share with a friend, share on your social media. You have no idea how much that helps. Follow me at Golden State Naturalist, tag me in your posts, and share away. And then at the end of the episode, I always say something interesting from my week. And from this week, it is that over the weekend, I got to go down to Inyo County, which is on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada mountains and like a lot farther south from where I live. And I went camping at a place called Conglomerate Mesa. And I had brought with me this new camp stove that I had never used before, and I was like trying to act like I knew what I was doing, and so I was putting the top of the stove onto the fuel bottle, and as I was putting it on there, fuel just started spraying everywhere, and it got all over my hands and like a little bit on my clothes, and thankfully people who actually know what they're doing came over and assisted me very quickly. So just thank you to Paul and Marjorie for that. Anyways, they showed me how to use my little camp stove and everything was fine after that. Somebody even brought me a wipe to get all of the fuel off of my hands. So maybe research your gear more than I did when you go camping. Okay, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this episode and this chat with Shalaco. I'll see you next time on Golden State Naturalist. Bye. The song you just heard is called I Dunno by Grapes, and you can find the link to that song as well as the Creative Commons license in the show notes. Bye.